Hi, this is Ross Pearsall, creator of Super Team Family, the Lost Issues blog, and you're watching Mr. Media.
I'm Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview. You can see, hear, and read more than 1,200 of my previous celebrity interviews at MrMedia.com. That's MRmedia.com. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Alexa Podcast, or Stitcher, and follow me on Twitter and Facebook. And if you really like the show, and I certainly hope you do, please tell the world with a 5-star review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. On today's show, I'll talk to Ross Pearsall, the digital comics artist and creator of the What Did I Just See? Super Team Family comic book covers. That's the way I think of it. What did I just see? He magically merges comic book covers, characters, and situations that cross all kinds of boundaries and universes. Stick around. If you're a comic book fan and you've never seen Ross Pearsall's Super Team Family work, put Mr. Media on pause while you look up brave and bold lost.blogspot.com. That's brave and bold lost.blogspot.com. Well, wait a minute. Okay, you're back. It's pretty cool, right? Every day, Pearsall takes his and our imagination to infinity and beyond by bringing together familiar and obscure comics characters on the cover of a comic book that has never existed but should, which he calls Super Team Family. The covers are typically in the form of the once popular DC Giant comics that promised so much and usually delivered so little, but always had the best covers. Want to see the Fantastic Four cross paths with Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Chewbacca? Pearsall made it happen. Marvel's Iron Fist and TV's Kung Fu Kane is played by David Carradine? Done. How about, this was great. I laughed out loud at this. How about the Black Panther meets Peter Sellers' Pink Panther? Yep, been there, he done that. And this is the only place that you'll see the Black Panther and Black Lightning square off. Pearsall calls them the greatest team-ups that never happened, but should have. And he's absolutely right. Well, today I've invited him on the show to talk about how Super Team Family comes together, how he gets his ideas, and if the copyright holders ever come around with legal claims. With any luck, you might even see a new team-up concept come together right before your eyes. Ross Pearsall, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. I was telling you before we went on, I had seen that Tony Isabella, who's the creator, as you know, of Black Lightning, had posted something, I want to say maybe Facebook, maybe Twitter, but he was very positive about what you do, and I thought, yeah, I want to have that guy on the show. I got to know how he does this. It just seems like such fun. And, it was interesting to see that you do a new one every day. That kind of blew my mind. That's got to be really challenging, right?
Well, that when I decided to make a blog, I had started doing these just on a message board, fooling around. Somebody suggested I make a blog out of it because I had made enough of them. And when I thought about the idea of doing a blog, a lot of comic blogs that I liked, it'd always be frustrating to me. I'd go see this comic blog, I'd scroll around. Oh, it's really fun. They've got some cool stuff here. I'd come back in a month, and there'd be one new entry on it. And so I said, I want something that's going to keep people wanting to come back. So I waited till I had a little backlog before I started the blog. And my first post, I posted 20 covers just so there was something there to look at. But other than that, I said, after that, I'm going to do it every single day. For the first year and a half or so, I did 5 days a week. And that allowed me to catch up a little more because I would usually create a cover a day, but I was only posting 5. So finally I got enough of a buffer area where I was comfortable switching to 7 days a week. And my attitude there was like, I'll do this as long as I can keep it up. And it snowballed since there. That was 7 years ago. And so fortunately, I have been able to keep up with it. And I think that's one thing that people like about the blog is that there's something to look at every day. It reminds me of, I think of it as a digital version of those page-a-day calendars where you have I used to have the Far Side or something. And It'd be great. There'd always be one little gag a day. I always could count on that for a laugh. I'd like to my blog serve that same kind of function. A little smile, laugh in the morning. I don't ask for anything more beyond that, and that's all I'm trying to do. And so I'm glad people have been able to follow it on a day-to-day basis, and that's allowed me to do some fun things like have real continuity in the blog, call back to certain cover storylines I've started before, or having 2 or 3 part stories, which work best when people are visiting on a regular basis. Although I do hear from some people that they trade wait, and they say, "Oh, I will wait a month, but then I have 31 new covers to look at." So whichever way you want to do it.
I could see that. That would be cool. I think. I was thinking, why does this appeal to me so much? And so I was thinking that when I was a teen in the 1970s. I mean, I always loved the idea of seeing, kind of my favorite characters teaming up in comics. The ones I remember, and I'm sure there were more, but I remember a Marvel Team Up, which was Spider-Man, Marvel 2-in-1, which was The Thing, The Brave and the Bold, of course, which you take the blog name of Batman. And I'm thinking, wasn't there also like a supervillain team up that Marvel had?
Yep, they had supervillain team up too. And well, yes, this is how the blog actually started. It was from Brave and the Bold. That was my favorite comic growing up. As a kid, I loved any comic. I had teams and team-ups. The more superheroes, the better. So I loved Avengers, Justice League, Brave and the Bold, that type. But Brave and the Bold put it over the top because it had Batman, probably my favorite DC character, and Jim Apato's artwork.
Oh, awesome stuff, yeah.
And then add in the crazy storytelling of Bob Haney, crazy in the best way possible. So I loved that series. Always wanted to see Jim Apato's take on all the different DC characters. Now, I loved Batman and the Outsiders, but I was always bummed that they had stopped Brave and the Bold at issue 200 to begin that new series. And I was, if that had only continued, what else would they have done? So my very first covers weren't even crossovers at all between companies. It was, what if Brave and the Bold kept running? I tried to keep using Jim Aparo artwork and only team Batman with other characters that were being published in DC during that time frame. Make it look like, just a continuation of the series. Mm-hmm. That's where it started. That's what I started posting on a message board, showing some friends who they liked it. And once I kind of exhausted that concept, a few people suggested, hey, have him team up with, Howard the Duck or something. I think that was my very first Marvel character, and I just did it on a whim. So that was funny. So I stretched it out by making Batman team up with anybody. And then I moved on to Marvel 2-in-1, swapping out the lead co-star from Batman to The Thing, and did that for a while. But that's why the blog's name address is Brave and Bold Lost, because it was called Brave and the Bold, The Lost Issues when I began the blog. And I couldn't change the domain once I changed themes, so I'm stuck with the old one sometimes. People wonder why that's there, but that's why. And so, yes, I went to Marvel 2-in-1 with The Thing, which was great. Opened up a lot of new possibilities of using DC characters I hadn't used before. And also, The Thing is such a great character to write for, even on a single image, because he's got a sense of humor. He kind of goes with everybody. And I like to put humor in my covers when I can. And The Thing lends himself a lot more to that than Batman. Usually he's the butt of the joke, being a straight man.
Yeah.
And then I decided to just blow the doors wide open with Super Team Family, the Lost Issues. If you remember from the 70s, Super Team Family was, I think it ran 18 issues in DC, and it was half reprint title, half new content, and it was just various team-ups. So on an issue, you might see a Teen Titans reprint, a World's Finest team reprint with Batman and Superman, but then they throw something new in there, like Creeper meets Wildcat. When I was a kid, I was like, what? The Creeper meets what? I ate that stuff up. Those crazy team-ups that you didn't think would happen or you didn't think should happen, but they were so crazy they might work. Or you just had to see, like, what's happening here? I name-dropped Bob Haney before. His Brave and the Bold stories were like that. His whole attitude was continuity be damned. Let's just tell a fun story. So if he grabbed a character from Earth 2 that wasn't supposed to be there, or aged characters 20 years just for the purpose of his story, so be it. And he didn't look back. And as a kid, didn't bother me at all. either. So I consider Bob Haney to be the patron saint of the blog. His attitude of making comics is my attitude of making the covers. They don't even make sense. And, I talked about before I try to have a little sense of continuity, but even my continuity breaks its own rules and everything. But it's the anything can happen concept of it, I think, is appealing to people. So that's what I try to do.
Well, that was always certainly the 60s DC was, there was no continuity. Nothing had to be connected, right? I mean, Marvel put that into effect in the 60s and continued it. They've kind of lost their way more than a few times, but who can blame them? I can't keep it all straight. I had to stop reading, comics week after week at a certain point because I just didn't know what the hell was going on. But DC was always like, oh, what the hell? Let's just, let's cross this one with that one, and who cares? And you're right. I mean, there's that Jim Aparo art, the Bob Haney stories. It was just fun. It was like a special piece of candy you got once a month.
Right. They wound up calling it Earth B. I don't know if that was for Earth Batman, Earth Brave and the Bold, or Earth Bob Haney, but they just gave him his little corner. I think because they got sick of people writing in, why is Wildcat on Earth 1? Or, how come Hawk and Dove aged and the Teen Titans didn't? And then finally they were just like, this is Earth B. So, which explained any Brave and the Bold stories that might not fit perfectly into the continuity of the overall comic line.
A couple weeks ago, I had Chris Claremont on the show. I always have to hesitate. Not the creator of the X-Men, but the writer of the modern X-Men, 35 years of modern X-Men history and all that means. And he said that he and he's told the story before, but for people who don't know it, it's kind of fun. They reached a point in the mid-'70s where they needed a story idea for X-Men, for the new X-Men, and they didn't know what to do, and came up. I'm trying to remember if Jim Shooter suggested this. Well, why don't you have the not ready for primetime players on? Saturday Night Live had just started, and he was like, "Well, what? Well, how do we do that? Well, just call over there. They're like a block away. Call them." And he called them, and mentioned it, and the person took a message and acted like, "What are you talking about?" And then a little while later, I think Lorne Michaels called back and said, "Really, you want to do this?" And they did it. And Belushi loved it. John Belushi loved it. I know this was probably so long ago, some people don't even know who I'm talking about. But
but that issue of Marvel Team Up is beloved by people today.
Yeah, it was a wonderful, fun comic, and the fun thing for Claremont, and I'm guessing you probably haven't had this experience, was that when it came out, Belushi invited him to SNL or to I can't remember. Oh, they went to the opening of Animal House. And then he got to go to an after party of Animal House with John Belushi and the cast, and that was a great story. And so the other one that comes to mind for me was Bat and Lash did what to me is still the craziest team up of all time. The Punisher meets Archie.
Oh yeah,
right. So he's been on the show and he talked about that, and that was just like that may not have been the first absolutely crazy team up, but it was nuts, right? I mean,
yeah, and with the disparate art styles and everything, but somehow they made that one work. I got a kick out of that issue.
It's very clever. So, how do you, you're well. In a minute, I want to tell people. In a minute, we're going to take a pause. And we're going to come back and actually give some. We're going to see your computer screen, and people can see a little bit about how you put something that links together. Is it still fun? How many of these have you done at this point?
Oh, I've done. Let's see. I've got about over 2,600 posted on the blog.
Oh my God!
And I try to stay a few months ahead of it too. So there's more to come. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't do it if I enjoyed it. I started to this, and I said, okay, God, I'll keep doing this as long as you give me inspiration and I find it enjoyable, and it has been. And every time I think I might be getting a little burned out, or I might be getting a little too repetitive, I'll get a good idea, or someone on the blog will make a comment in the comments section with a brilliant team up and it's something, or I'll just find an image online that I say, oh, I know what I could do with that, and something will spark it again. It's another reason I try to stay a few months ahead, in case I do get writer's block, I don't feel like, oh, I've got to do a cover today and just to hammer one out just to check it off for the day. I want to only put out the stuff that I think is worth posting on the blog. I mean, believe me, my covers are there, warts and all. If you go back to the beginning, you can see where I began, and you can see, all the Brave and the Bolds, all the Marvel 2-in-1s. It was before I even thought of having a blog, before I even imagined sharing these with people. And I did consider, let me just put the good ones up. But then I said, I like that you can kind of see the progression of how I was just learning to do it. And, I was on MS Paint until first couple 100 issues of Super Team Family before even switching to Photoshop, which completely blew the doors open. So some of those old ones, especially the MS Paint ones, are pretty crude and stuff, considering what I had to work with and my just lack of knowledge. But I'm kind of glad that I put them on anyway, as ugly as some of them might be, that it does show the progression, and that I was nobody with any special knowledge. It was just somebody I was learning as I went along.
I understand how that is. There are more than 1,200 Mr. Media interviews. Some of them go back before the internet was invented, back to like late 70s and early 80s when I was just covering pop music, and I had like a phone interview or an in-person interview with somebody. And they are just horrible. I can't stand to listen to my voice. I can't stand. It pains me to hear myself trying to create questions for people, Frank Zappa and Charlie Daniels and Joan Jett. And it's like, oh my God! But I have to remind myself the internet didn't exist. I didn't have the resources. We didn't know everything there is to know about someone we were fascinated by.
That's true.
And they're just touring, and next week they're going to be in your town, and other than they're listening to their record, you didn't really have anything to go on. So, yeah, you listen to those and you go, boy, he really sucked at this then. Hopefully it's a little better now, 35 years later. Why don't we, before we take a break, what do you do for a living?
I work with my brother and my father.
Yeah.
We sell metrology equipment, nothing to do with comics. We're salesmen.
What does that even mean? What is metrology?
It's measuring and inspection equipment for companies that manufacture parts. We sell high-tech scales, calibration machines, anything where you've got any kind of manufacture machine that has to make the same kind of movement over and over exactly and precisely. Mm-hmm. We sell the stuff that makes those movements and measures that.
Wow. So engineering related, I guess.
Yes. My dad was an engineer, and my brother took over his business a few years ago. Dad still comes in, and I work with them.
Oh, that's very cool. Completely different from comics. That's what I was.
Yes. It's
really interesting.
It's two different worlds.
All right. Well, let's do this. Let's take a break, and folks. We're just going to take a break long enough to set up so we can show you Ross's screen. And show you how he does what he does, and then so we'll be back. So we'll be back right after this. So we're back, and I think you can already see on your screen. You can see Hawkman, and I'm thinking that's Hourman, and I can't.
Dr. Midnight.
Dr. Midnight, and who is that on the right?
That's the original Atom.
Oh, of course.
This is the cover of All-Star Squadron #1. Very
good. And so what we're going to do now, folks, is so Ross Pearsall is still with us, and he's going to just kind of take us through. We're looking at his actual computer screen where he does the Super Team Family covers. And I've just asked him if he could maybe just kind of walk us through how something comes together.
Sure. So I wanted to show you how I did the cover that I posted this morning. We are taping this on February the 25th. And I posted another continuation in the Supergirl Miss Marvel series. This is my 7th cover featuring them together, and that's because it's Linda Danvers and Carol Danvers. In the Super Team Family world, they are twins. So I've had a few covers with them. And so the first thing I do is I look on the internet or through my library of images to see what I want to use. And I pick a Miss Marvel image. I'm going to use this one. Put it in And I start everything in MS Paint, even though I used to be, uh, I'm on Photoshop now. I start everything on MS Paint. So I've got my Miss Marvel cover, nice Dave Cockrum, Terry Austin image. I looked at that and it looked like it would fit nice and perfectly with this splash page from an Adventure Comics adventure of Supergirl. So we got Bob Oxner and Vince Coletta. So I looked at this. I said, okay, I could see fitting her right in there. And like I say, it's faster for me to fool around on MS Paint in the beginning. And so I do that, and I kind of say, okay, so this is where it starts. This is my basic concept. Very crude, but in my mind's eye, I can see where it could go.
So let me ask you. Let me ask you a question. Interrupt for just a second. For people who are not very Photoshop savvy, so how did you remove Ms. Marvel from the other comic? Can you explain how you do that?
Well, with MS Paint, yeah, I can actually even show you. Okay. With MS Paint, you know, you get the select tool, and I just kind of go around like that, and you cut it. And then you can paste it back again, do whatever you want. Make sure it is a transparent background. So basically, cutting and pasting.
Okay, so it's that simple. And then do you go in and obviously you trim away things?
I reversed it and shrunk it, you know. But this is MS Paint. It's very limited what you can do, which is why some of my early covers aren't nearly as fancy as the ones I try to attempt now.
Okay.
But I'll take you into Photoshop and see where we go from there.
Okay, great.
So now we're in Photoshop. We see the cover I like. Now, if you see down here, we've got the background. The first thing I do when I want to isolate the image is I put a solid color in between a copy of that background. That way, so when I delete parts, it's much more clear to me. So as you can see, now I will put that color in. You can see between. And for those, deleted everything I don't want.
For folks who are watching
however, you can see.
Oh, just interrupt for a second, Russ. For folks that are watching on a small screen, he's in the lower right-hand corner of the program.
Yes.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, that shows the various layers I'm working with. So you've got the background copy, the color layer, which is this green. And here's the copy. I've deleted everything behind it. But now, of course, you see, we get all this stray material that was from the cover that I've got to get rid of. A lot of people would see my final cover and go, okay, he had a Supergirl cover. He's like color forms, slapped a Ms. Marvel on there, and that was it. But a lot of times I get stuff like this that I got to fix. So I'll make another layer on top of that. And with the handy use of my clone stamp tool, got to get in real close and do a clone. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. And then I could clone that anywhere. And that's pretty much how I fill out the cover and get rid of all that spaces.
And do you ever, I hate to ask this, and people are going to hate me for this, but do you ever, you have these two women, do you ever mess with any of their, physical attributes?
No, I try to, this is as much drawing as I try to do. I'll show you on the next image where I extend some pictures, but my blog is a celebration, a love letter of the characters and the comic artists that I love so much. So I try to present the art as clearly and as crisply as possible. So I never want to change the artwork. Sometimes I will have to add a leg that was chopped off or something, or do something like that. But, I want as much as possible just to represent what the artist drew and not really add stuff of my own to it. So I try not to embellish too much, just in places like this where there was parts to get rid of like that. So we will go over to my Supergirl cover that this is going to go on to. Now, this has got a lot of issues. I love the cover, but it's filthy.
Yeah.
This one I got from Comixology. Nice, clear, big, shiny print. It's what I love to work with. But some of the beggars can't be choosers. A lot of the older stuff I get is this. You can see print through the other side. It's dirty. It's messy. Coloring's off. His eyeball's messed up.
Well, is that a cover? That's an inside page, right?
It's a splash page.
Yeah, it's not a cover.
Page to Adventure Comics,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
And I kind of want to get rid of this. It doesn't really work with what I'm doing. So I got some work to do before I just slap Ms. Marvel on there. So once again, I'll put my solid cover between it. And then I get rid of all the background part that I want to get rid of. I'm going to add my own pavement and background in here. A little easier than just cleaning it up. And so now I'm going to go through and recolor. And once again, I take, this is very painstaking, probably the longest part of the process. Take the clone stamp tool, fix up all the miscolored stuff.
Oh my
get rid
God.
of all the logos I don't want. And like you'll see, I extend this. So yes, I am drawing on it, but I'm still just drawing what the artist would have drawn himself. So we'll see what that looks like after I have done that whole part.
And Russ, I have to ask, do you have any art training? Have you ever worked as an artist?
No professional training, but I always loved to draw when I was a kid. Loved to doodle and draw growing up, and took art classes, but no professional training. You can see my comics on my recent 2000th cover. I included a bunch of comics I actually made to make it a full issue, and you can actually see my artwork there. But even that's from 25 years ago. My artwork now is digital stuff. So, but as you can see, cleaned it up a lot, comparing between the two. That's what I start with. That's what I end with. So very painstaking, but really worth it. Now I want to put in some background for the pavement. Let's see, where did that go? So I got that. It was basically just a gradient from lighter to darker, and I put a slight texture over it, crackulature, or I think this is just regular grain, enlarged clumps. And that just, I find it's good for pavement. I have to create pavement a lot. Gives it a little extra. But you can see I added, added that in the windows and everything. Then I'll put some sky in the background. All right. So basically we have that there. And
this is just amazing to me. I have such limited Photoshop skills myself that when I see someone do this stuff, it just blows my mind.
Well, and I like to show you, and as you can see, I've extended some of these characters down here, cleaned up his face, fixed his eye. A lot of little things that nobody ever notices in the final image, but it's all about just having one good image. You're not supposed to show every little thing you've done. So now I will put Ms. Marvel in there. I noticed she wasn't as popping as much as I wanted to, so I put another one under her and gave that a slight stroke. Didn't work on all pieces. As you see, I don't have it completely filled because some parts I didn't want the stroke. That just lifts her out. But again, even though I've cleaned all this up, the original Adventure Comics splash page, this was an interior page, as you pointed out. This was from a cover. Slightly less glossy. So I want to fix the contrast and brightness on this. So that's what I'm going to do here. Fix the vibrance and the brightness.
Wow.
Now it all
Look at that.
kind of all goes together and looks like one uniform image. Now I'm kind of happy with how it looks. So I'm going to go copy this whole thing together and take it over to my template.
Folks, I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am, but I really don't care. I'm enjoying it too, enough for all of us. Go right ahead.
So here's my template. Sometimes I will work directly onto the template. Usually I'll work in a separate image and pull it over the template like I'm doing here. Now on the template, I have all the stuff that goes on every cover. You get the spine, DC bullet, STF logo, 60 cents, comics code, and UPC label. Some people have said to me, oh, it's too cluttered with all this extra stuff. Why don't you just leave your stuff free? For me, that sells it as a real comic.
Right.
Every comic I read growing up had this stuff on it. I don't see it on there. To my eye, it screams fake cover right away, even though mine are usually pretty obvious fake covers given the nature of what's on them. But that's why I keep them. Anyway, so I'll pop this bad boy in.
Look at that.
And even then, there was still some stuff I had to fix. I noticed on this, there was the woman and her son were kind of sticking legs, arms out. This piece of rubble was a little too big. It was sticking out. Looked kind of messy. So I just went in with the clone stamp in, got rid of the boy and the mother, shortened this piece of rubble. It's just that little type of tweaking that keeps going on.
Wow.
Add in your issue number.
Oh, see, now that's great detail that I hadn't noticed before. Each one does have an issue number. I wasn't even aware of it.
Oh, they're consecutive, too.
Look at that.
So, that's right. We're on issue 2144, and that's what I said. And I've got a 510 of Marvel 2-in-1 and Brave and the Bold, so we're getting close to 2,700 covers total. So then I put in my dialogue, word balloon. Word balloon I create by oval ellipses and just using these two.
And read for people what it says in case they're reading it watching on a screen that's too small.
Well, as I've mentioned, I've used these two, Carol Danvers and Linda Danvers, and in my world they're twins. And so I'm trying to hint that maybe they've raised this gorilla growing up and gave him away. So he says, the Danvers twins, you promised to love me forever and bet you gave me away. That's why he's on a rampage. And hence great. The title, Pet Peeved. So hopefully, I try to give people an idea of the story, and I use titles and word balloons, which have gone by the wayside for the most part on covers, but I need those tools when all I have is one image to tell a story. So I usually have at least one of the two in there.
Ross, have people in comics ever sought you out to do stuff for them? Because yes, I've gotten a lot of suggestions for the blog, at least. I've Patrick Zurcher and Gail Simone. Of course, we talked about Tony Isabella, Jim Valentino, Eric Larson, Roger Stern. A lot of people have suggested covers that I've done. Ron Mars wanted me to use his new character, Shinku. So, yes, and it's great. And it's one of the best things personally for me about doing the blog. Like I said, it's a love letter to the creators and characters that I've loved so much. And the fact that in some small way, not only have I given them enjoyment, but I've quote unquote collaborated with Gail Simone by doing a concept that she came up with. I feel like, hey, I've worked in the industry, in my very small way. So yes, I love that. As you see, I just put on the two logos of the characters. A lot of times I'll change the colors of those, but I like the way they went together. I put the "and" on it. Now, one thing I usually leave alone is this logo. Sometimes I'll change the size, but just the coloring, it was blending too far into the walls there. So I always gave that a little brightness and changed that up. And there you go. And there's the final look to the cover. So that is so cool. So one of my favorite things on your blog. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, yeah, it's a long way from where I started, but that's where I go from there.
That's very cool. On your blog, Ross, one of the really cool things, I mean, there's so much that's cool on the blog, and there's so many covers, but you have a button up near the top left. It's kind of a randomizer where you can just push a button and it'll just randomly bring up covers from all the years that you've been doing it. That is very, very fun. It's just a great... So for people who are not sure how to find their way around, I think you should just go and click on that.
Oh yeah, that was a suggestion by someone just a few months ago, and I didn't even know there was such an animal. And they said, oh yeah, and I found the HTML script where I can add it to my blog, and I've liked it. And the blog is big enough and long enough that it is a fun thing to just find a random cover to go through. And I also like on the side of my blog that I have a labels section where you can search by character or you can search by artist, and that's a fun also way to jump around the blog.
The only thing, for me, is like I would love to if a comics publisher actually published a collection of the covers.
Yes,
but the rights would be killer, I guess.
That's the thing about my blog is people are, wonder, oh, why can't you put out a book of these? I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm using existing artwork featuring licensed characters. It's just no way I could possibly legally do it. And also people, for the same reason, people want T-shirts and mugs and just images of the covers on different things. I've made a few T-shirts up just for my own personal thing and showing them on the blog. Oh, where can I get that? It's the same rule. Believe me, I'd love if I could monetize it and make money that way, but that's not what the blog is about, unfortunately. Just the nature of the blog and the very thing that makes it cool is the reason that I could never do that. So unfortunately, I can't do that. But it would be nice to see them all together in one thing. But a book would be nice, but really the best way to experience it, I think, is on the web, because you can jump around so quickly from cover to cover in a way you really never could with a book. And like I said, that label section where you can search by artist or search by creator, you never could with a book. So really that is the best way to experience it anyway, on a computer screen, with a nice big computer screen, not on your phone, people.
Right. It's true. It's good on an iPad or tablet.
It's perfect for iPads.
What I found fun is over the years, I've had family members who've not even don't know anything about comics, but who've happened upon one of these covers. They've seen it in a news feed or something, and they're like, "Oh, Bob will love this." And then so randomly, out of the blue, they'll just pop up, and it's just so very cool. Has it made you want to work in comics? I mean, you're coming up on a big birthday next year. Have you thought about, maybe I could change gears for the next 10 years and actually work in this industry?
I always wanted to work in comics when I was a kid, and I got into other things, and that never came to fruition. But it's probably too late for me now. And I think as far as working in comics, this is me working in comics.
Okay.
It's I work on comic characters every day. People, I have thousands of people who see my comic artwork on a daily basis. I communicate back and forth with comics industry pros as a result of it. So, other than the paycheck, I'm getting a lot of the stuff I would have gotten out of working on a comics. So it is getting that Jones for me out of the way. I still think of myself as a fan first and foremost, than somebody who worked in it. I don't think they're probably looking for younger blood than me at this point at the companies, but I do love the interactions that I have had with people in the industry. It's been a really great byproduct.
Have there been team ups that you've wanted to do that haven't gelled for one reason or another? Or have you always been able to pull off whatever you wanted to do?
Oh, every once in a while, people will suggest characters that are just so obscure. They've only appeared once or twice. I just don't have the images, So there's a few things that have escaped me that way. And believe me, I have lists. I get suggestions every day. I have a few pages with a couple hundred suggestions, and I try to get to the ones that people suggested. That Black Panther, Pink Panther. That actually was
awesome.
one
Oh my
people
God.
had been suggesting for a long time, and people wanted the cartoon Pink Panther with Black Panther, and the main reason was just the disparate art styles. Sometimes I find like putting a cartoon with a real, it doesn't. Sometimes you can get it to work. It doesn't always do. I try to find an animated version to put it with or something so the style's a little closer. And so the Black Panther wasn't really working that way. And then I was looking around again. I wanted to do something because I knew I'd be reviewing the movie this week, so I wanted to do a Black Panther cover. And then when I saw the Peter Sellers image, they had done a collection of all the movies together. Finally, I came up with something that sort of worked. Still didn't work perfectly with the images, but it got the idea across. And that one was all about I'm embarrassed to say a lot of my covers start this way. It was all about Wakanda Fool Am I. You know, a lot of times I come up with the title first and do a cover to go around it.
I saw that, I guess it was yesterday, and I was sitting at my desk. I was working on the script for the interview, and my wife's in the other room watching TV, and I just started laughing and laughing. She said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Here, I'm going to send this to you." She said, "Okay, yeah, that's pretty funny." You know. And the other one I liked was Patrick Stewart versus Patrick Stewart.
Oh yeah,
yeah. X-Men and Star Trek: Next Generation.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah, I tried to do a similar one with Han Solo and Indiana Jones. It's fun when you get the actors to team up with themselves.
Now, there's almost you're soon you'll be hitting 3,000 of these. Are there Easter eggs in any of them, or is it everything pretty obvious, or do you actually have the time and energy to bury things still further like they do in the TV shows and movies?
Sometimes I do little things. You know, I did a team up between the Fox and the Crow, and now hardcore comics fans will remember there was a comic called Fox and the Crow, funny animal, with a little cartoon fox and cartoon crow, and so now I had the new hero versions of the Fox and Crow in this, but on a tree way in the background, I had the old Fox and Crow.
Oh, really?
Swinging in there, and a few people picked up on that. And sometimes I'll do just real strange stuff, like for issue, 1938, I made sure it was a Superman cover. 1939, it was a Batman cover. Sometimes the cover issues correspond with the character's first publication date. I'll throw little things like that in there, and I tell you, I'm amazed. I think, I'm pretty well versed in comics, and even by doing this blog, it's forced me to learn about characters that I didn't know so much about. But I think I'm pretty good. I've collected for my whole life. I've been reading all along. But I tell you, the people who come on my blog, they put me to shame. I mean, I can't put any Easter egg that somebody's not going to spot. They know everything about everything. I'm always fascinated by some of the concepts and ideas that they come up with because of just their knowledge and backstory of characters. So usually they're finding Easter eggs from me, not the other way around.
I run into that whenever I do interviews with either people in comics or music, particularly, because the fans of music and comic, they know everything about everything. I had John Doe, the singer-songwriter from X, the punk band, had him on. I had a great time talking to him. And then there are people like, how did you not ask about this particular song when he sang it? I'm like, are you kidding me?
People ask a lot where I get my backgrounds a lot of time, and it is tough. A lot of times I'll have the images and the characters will be positioned perfectly, but where they were standing in both situations didn't work where I pulled them out of, so I've got to come up with a new background, and it's hard to find a background with. And you saw in my tutorial how I have to take elements out just to use the image. So I like to find background art from different places, and I use like video games and animation cells, and a lot of times before they put the characters in, I use that. And there used to be and I don't know if it's still around. When we were kids, it was like a I don't know if you call it a toy or what, but it was a thing for kids. It was a rub-on transfer kit.
Yeah.
And you'd get like a background, and it would be Batman or Star Wars or Rainbow Bright or whatever it was, and you'd have a bunch of characters, and you'd take your pencil and you'd rub them down on this background they gave you and make a little scene out of it. Well, anyways, I found this website that just had the backgrounds with none of the characters rubbed off, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. I left click and saved them all.
That's
so anyways,
awesome.
I made this cover up, and it was like completely unrelated to it. It was a Wolverine and Green Arrow, and they were. I made them on an island battling dinosaurs. Green Arrow's making some quip. Oh, the last island I was on didn't have dinosaurs. And do you know, somebody was like, oh, are they ready to meet Doctor Who? They knew the background, exactly where I got it. Oh, that's from Doctor Who, Presto Magic.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, wow, that is a good eye. I mean, you could just tell by like a mountain in the background and the shape of the dinosaurs. But and it's nothing gets by them.
No, they wear me out sometimes, I have to admit. Well, listen, before we wrap up, I know you have a Patreon account, so fans can support your efforts. So what I wanted to do, since you can't you can't sell the covers, you can't publish them per se for money, you can have people support you. So I want to give you a minute to maybe tell people how Patreon works and how they can support what you do if they're enjoying it.
Oh yeah, Patreon's it's a great site. You can go on there and support all kinds of creators. Yeah, you can go there. It's as low as $1. You can pledge monthly support, and for anybody you like, including me. And yes, and I've been very grateful. That's one reason the blog has been able to run as long as it has. Is I've had a bunch of supporters on there. Yeah, you go on there. It's very quick. It's one click on there. You just search for Ross Pearsall or Super Team Family. I've got links on the blog and links on my Facebook fan page. And so yeah, I'm appreciative for anybody who can go on there. Like I say, I get suggestions all the time, but I try to give my patrons little extra attention as far as their suggestions goes, because they go the extra mile to support me as well. So I try to support them and back.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, folks, listen, you can see Ross Pearsall's latest Super Team Family covers on his free blog. It's braveandboldlost.blogspot.com. How come you haven't just gotten superteamfamily.com? Why?
It's these blogger things. It's once, I had been doing it for a few years before I switched to Super Team Family. And I said, yeah, well, it would make more sense. But by that time, braveandboldlost.blogspot.com
people knew
Tom was linked everywhere, all over the place. I would have had to contact so many people to change it, and I don't even know if you can change it in Blogger or not. I don't know if they allow you to. So
good point.
I think people can figure it out, and it's pretty. I mean, at this point, all you have to do is look up Super Team Family. My blog will come up the second thing on Google, and it's all around. I mean, people put my covers on Pinterest and all over the place, and most people are good enough to leave a link. So it's easy enough to find.
All right, so let me give it to you again, folks, and just in case. It's Brave and Bold Lost. That's all solid. braveandboldlost.blogspot.com. Can people find you on Twitter and Facebook? Do you do any social media?
I'm at Ross Pearsall on Twitter, and Facebook is just put in Super Team Family, The Lost Issues, and you'll see my fan page come up. So we got a pretty fun fan page there, and and I always loved hearing from people and getting their feedback.
That's awesome. Well, Ross Pearsall, it's so much fun. I mean, seeing the blog is so much fun. Talking to you has been a delight, and seeing you actually do the work, very, very cool. As I said, this is one of those interviews. I don't really care if anybody else is interested. I wanted to see how it was done. I'm hoping it will interest people as much as it did me. And
me too.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Media, today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience full of forgotten comic book characters, hoping Ross Pearsall will give them new life in the next Super Team Family in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida.
Hi, this is Rich Scheidner. And if you've ever wondered what it was like to be a stand-up comedian in the 1980s, I'm going to do you a big favor. Instead of billions of dollars for a time machine, you can just spend $24.95 and buy my new book, Kicking Through the Ashes, My Life as a Stand-Up in the 1980s Comedy Boom. It will save you money and give you thrills. It will take you there. Go to my website, richscheidner.com. Go to amazon.com and buy this book.
I told Michael Urie I was a little bothered that my gray hair was becoming more noticeable, but I said, at least it's coming in with a Reed Richards pattern.
Man, I wish I had that.